Today in the Titans franchise, we are going to recap one of the biggest off-seasons I've ever had on this channel. I streamed the off-season over the weekend. If you want to watch it, I'll link it in a YouTube card. It was a 3.5-hour stream. I'll be condensing everything and showing you a little bit more at the very end. This was a unique off-season because 3 years into a franchise, going 4-13 doesn't usually happen. But this year didn't go our way. We ended up trading away a bunch of players at the deadline, setting ourselves up for this offseason. We own the number 1 pick, and going into the stream, my favorite player for that spot was Trayvon Randolph, the wide receiver with excellent size, athleticism, and sky-high potential from everything we had learned. But I also knew we allowed the most points in NFL history last year, and I really liked Tim Bishop as the second best player potentially in the draft. We go through the Super Bowl week and find that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the newest champions in the series. Quarterback Brock Como is Super Bowl MVP and becomes the first quarterback drafted in this series to win a ring. One of the first things we did to open the offseason was fire defensive coordinator Thomas Quinn. I mean, we had one of the worst defenses in NFL history last year, so we'll bring in a new coordinator along with our new 4-3 scheme. I liked the talents and everything unlocked for Ian Alexander, and he becomes the new defensive coordinator. Next, I wanted to check on regression, notably for Derrick Henry, who is now 31 years old and is coming off a very down season by his standards, only at 4 yards a carry, 6 touchdowns, and a long run of 23 yards. He went down a couple points. The older players also went down a good bit, but outside of Derrick Henry, there aren't many players over 30 years old I even wanted to bring back, so regression wasn't a huge factor. Next, we got Mock Draft 3 to start to put this final picture together for the NFL draft. And it was very weird because we had Terrell Parker being mocked to us at number 1. And we're not taking a safety at number 1. So that makes the mock really hard to gauge. But it starts to show you where players are projected to go. We see the stock is falling for Brian Nava, who was my favorite quarterback going into the offseason. Kerry Farrell sneaks into the first round for the first time that I have seen. We had Logan Ryan retire and Adam Thielen retired. He was going to possibly be a free agent target of mine as I look for another slot receiver. But outside of that, no major retirement news for us. When it came to re-signing players, there weren't many I wanted to bring back at this stage, but Kyron Johnson was one that showed some good things at the end of the year. He ended up declining us. We do get a deal done with Brandon Smith, but outside of him, I withdrew any offers here for pretty much everybody. Most of them had no interest in re-signing because now we are no longer a team viewed as a playoff contender, so that makes it really difficult to get interest in players. You have to really overpay if you're a bad team and you want to sign free agents. We do not offer a contract to Adam Kane at this point, and then we use the franchise tag to bring back kicker Matt Gay, who was very good last year. Next up, I was interested in fielding offers for a few different players, beginning with Treylon Burks, who is entering the final year of his deal, has been alright, a good complimentary receiver, but somebody I wasn't interested in long term, along with Jeffrey Simmons, who's somebody that's just been underwhelming. We start to get some combine data at this stage and find that Trayvon Randolph ran a 4.44, also a ridiculous 43-inch vertical. Then we see Tim Bishop and his combine looks very good as well. Going into the offseason, my main focuses were to find this team a new quarterback. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out with Malik Willis. I also wanted to look at wide receivers. Defensively, linebacker needed a ton of work, but basically anything but corner was on the table. Next up, I talked about making that Falcons first round pick a conditional pick, and seeing as how they did not make the Super Bowl, I'll give them back their first round pick in exchange for their second, giving us 3 second round picks in the draft. We got the combine info now on all the quarterbacks. We see Josh Holcomb ran a 4.8 40-yard dash, has poor acceleration, And Brian Nava ran a 4.77 40-yard dash with decent acceleration, giving him a little bit better mobility. Then we go to Simon Clemens, who is the best scrambling quarterback in this class with a 4.5 40 speed time and really good combine grades across the board. Kerry Farrell was maybe the most balanced with 4.6 speed and also pretty good accuracies, all being in the B range. We had 4 really intriguing quarterbacks in this class. But it was time to see which of these needs we could solve through free agency. And we do have some great receivers at the very top of the board, none of which were actually interested in us. I originally had interest in Deontay Johnson, but seeing Devontae Smith there was a big deal. Trey Lance, the most intriguing quarterback available, has 7 teams interested, doesn't like Tennessee for this offseason. I didn't love the running backs that were available, so trading Derrick Henry didn't seem like anything I was going to entertain. And then linebacker, I was really hoping to find some big additions. And I thought originally that Foye Oluokun here would give us that coverage skill, but I think that a lot of that has regressed. It's only a 67 zone coverage now, and I'm really looking for better cover skills over the middle. The best zone cover player in free agency was apparently Monty Rice, and we just had him on the team for the entire first 3 years. So that forced me to look instead at potential trades. And that's when I began to really consider the possibility of trading for linebacker Isaiah Simmons, a very unique athlete with 93 speed, 81 zone coverage. He's one of the best coverage linebackers we have in the league. The Cardinals were 8-9 last season, and they have a major need at defensive tackle because their whole defensive line is depleted. Could Jeffrey Simmons be traded to get Isaiah Simmons in our front 7? They would be willing to do the trade for a 2, 3, and a 4, which I felt like was very reasonable, and he still hasn't even been paid a big contract yet. So at this point, I didn't want to make the trade quite yet, but I fully intended to go get Isaiah Simmons at some point. The reason I didn't do the trade right here is because I knew I likely wasn't taking a quarterback with our number 1 selection, but I had to go get one at some point. And I just didn't know what it would take to get a quarterback and what would be left over for Isaiah Simmons. So I felt like if I was going to make a move, it would be during the draft. But going back to free agency, how about the safety position? Eddie Jackson has lost some of his speed, so he wasn't as intriguing, but Ronnie Harrison caught my attention because of a very balanced skill set, good ability against the run, and I think somebody who offers you a little skill in all the areas you look for at safety. 2 years, $10 million was the offer. Going to receiver, I'd love to bring in a slot receiver. We saw Kendrick Bourne have success. We saw Kyle Phillips have some success. Kadarius Toney was the best fit in free agency, at least when it came to receivers who had some interest in us. But you see some really big names there, and you wonder, with all our cap space, is there a way you could bring in Devontae Smith? I messed with this offer a bunch of times, and I think I finalized things around 4 years and $90 million, a very big deal. I put out an offer. I wanted to bring in Devontae Smith. I also wanted to go back to linebacker. Even if we had Isaiah Simmons on this defense, we need more. And Pete Werner seemed like a really solid addition, a perfect player to add to a linebacker core that didn't have much going right for it, coming off a year with 3 interceptions, 130 tackles, 2 years, $8 million was the offer. And then Divine Diablo also seemed intriguing because he's one of the better cover linebackers available, extremely rangy, high hit power, a very fun player. I believe he was drafted to be a safety, and I gave him an offer as well for a couple years. And then I looked at our trade block, still thinking about, who's the future running back? I can't trade Derrick Henry if I don't have somebody lined up. But I liked Armani Bell, and he's somebody I wrote down to maybe come back to later. The Buccaneers would be willing to trade him for maybe Brian Cook or a combination of a 2 and 5. So I was going to save that for later. And at safety, I saw Jaquan Brisker was available from the Bears. And he's somebody else I wrote down just in case we couldn't find the safeties and wanted to add one later on. I then offered a contract to safety Caden Stearns. I was looking for a rangy safety with high speed, good zone coverage to start, giving some playing time to. And that gave us our first 5 targets of free agency, Devontae Smith being the big one. We have those offers evaluated, and we see that every player signs somewhere. And we have gotten 3 new defenders, Ronnie Harrison, Pete Werner, and Divine Diablo. We missed out on Devontae Smith, who is headed to the Miami Dolphins. Yes, the Dolphins who have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and last year signed Calvin Ridley. They have the deepest receiving core I have ever seen. A.J. Bingham is now their 5th. A player I loved in the draft last year and immediately became interested in possibly acquiring because he has that slot receiver skill set that I am looking for right now. If I wanted to trade for A.J. Bingham, it would take a 2 and a little more, or maybe giving up Trevor Penning. Bingham did play a little bit last year, but it's hard to see him getting any playing time there with the 4 receivers in front of him. They wouldn't do it for just a second, and I left it there for the time being. We also had a long back and forth in the stream about if I should go to the transaction log and undo the signing of Devontae Smith, because no, it does not make sense. No, it is not realistic. I ended up, because it was so split, doing a poll. And it ended up being 52% wanted me to undo it, but I still kind of felt like, what else were they going to do with their cap space? They have the rookie quarterback. There aren't other options available. So I decided if it was that split, why not just let it be? On top of that, Devontae's going to play. It hurts Calvin Ridley, not Devontae Smith. All right, let's go sign a punter. I offered a 2-year contract to Jack Fox, and he quickly accepted that. I did not forget about Kyron Johnson and his 93 speed or whatever it is, so I offered him a deal. He ended up accepting as well. In the new mock draft, they have us taking Brian Nava at number 1, but everything here is so screwed up. They got players going in the top 5 that were never considered earlier, Trayvon Randolph falling to 12. This actually began to scare me a little bit, just because I liked Randolph so much, and seeing him fall to 12 in the mock had me a little concerned. In the next free agent period, we offered a deal to Carlos Basham to increase our edge rush depth. Got to give edge rushers pretty decent contract offers. And then for D-line depth inside, Fedarian Mathis. And both players ultimately accepted their contracts. Next, I knew we had some 5th-year options to take care of, and we begin with wide receiver Treylon Burks. I feel like Burks just hasn't developed as quickly as I would like, and I don't want to give him the 5th-year option, which would be a pretty big payday for wide receiver. And then for Trevor Penning, although he's our starting left tackle and I traded for him, I don't want to pick this up because I don't want to make him one of the top paid left tackles already when he hasn't shown he deserves that. Not even for just a season. He's got to prove a lot still going into this next year. Following this stage, free agency was basically done for us, and we get the final mock draft. Now it shows Joshua Holcomb going at 2, Tim Bishop going down to 4. Trayvon Randolph still slides a bit though, and because it was still mocking him at 12, I felt like I had to finalize his scouting profile and find out what his grade truly is. So I gave him, Brian Nava, and Simon Clemens the final individual workouts, just so I could hopefully get their talent grades. It turns out Trayvon Randolph's top 5, like I expected. Brian Nava, solid round 1. I, however, did not finish the profile on Simon Clemens, but did find out his accuracies, showing he had C short accuracy, B medium, and B deep. It was time for the NFL draft, with our Tennessee Titans picking at number 1. I was hoping to have made a larger splash in free agency to help out our defense that was one of the worst in NFL history last year. I took a look at trade downs because it seemed like Randolph wasn't going to go until a little bit later, but I also didn't really want to take any chances here, and falling down to 6 or 7 was too far. The entire day, it came down to two players at number one. Do you go wide receiver Trayvon Randolph because he is a unique athlete with top 5 talent? Or do you go Tim Bishop, an incredibly athletic 280-pound edge rusher that I thought could very well be the second best player in this draft? It's not just about building up the right team. Who do you need to beat? You got the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback and the high-flying Chiefs offense. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and the Buffalo Bills. And now, the vaunted Miami Dolphins with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Calvin Ridley, and Devontae Smith surrounding their quarterback Shelton Cunningham. They put so many weapons around him, he became the league MVP as a rookie. And that's why we will be selecting Trayvon Randolph, number 1 in the draft. The AFC is an offensive conference, and I'm trying to build the offense that can put us in the conversation with those teams. We've now drafted 3 first-round pass catchers in this series, but knew the next step was to find the man who would be throwing to them. It wouldn't be Josh Holcomb, as he was selected number 2 by the Steelers. Would the Texans possibly take a quarterback this year? No, they went corner, Sammy Barden. Philadelphia didn't need a quarterback here, and at number 4, they took Tim Bishop. The New York Jets, at pick number 5, took Duke Bowie, the second corner going in the top 5. And this is where I began to think about trading up. Can we get up, perhaps, with one of these next few teams? The Saints have their young quarterback. The Raiders have a veteran in Derek Carr, but they could be looking to draft somebody. And then all the Commanders have is Sam Howell. I did offer a trade to the Commanders, but the chat talked me into this a little bit, and it's similar to what I did in the Broncos franchise when Jesse Heikkinen was taken by the Dolphins. If the Commanders really want a quarterback, they wouldn't want to trade with us. So we should let them make their pick at 6. The Commanders select Evan Hewitt, a tackle from Auburn. They did not go quarterback. I decided to do the same exact thing next pick with the Raiders, and they passed on a quarterback, taking Justin Gilmore. It was time to complete the move up with the New Orleans Saints. They have Bryce Gilliard, 72 overall with a morale boost right now. They view him as quarterback of the future. I was willing to give up our future first-round pick to secure our quarterback, and we made the move to 8. Trading our future first-round pick and a 4th, along with 33 overall. And my favorite quarterback going into this whole process has been Brian Nava, as the most accurate quarterback with a very strong arm, a quick throwing motion. He comes in with hidden development, just like Trayvon Randolph. And it turned out he had enough mobility, and to me, enough is being able to run a play-action bootleg and having it be functional and not just slow and a bad idea. After that, we had our receiver, we had our quarterback. I knew that the rest of this draft would be spent on finding defensive replacements. It is weird to have a defense as bad as we had and not attack that early, but like I said, it's an offensive conference, and we still had a couple second-round picks, a 3rd, a 4th to play with. And if we see a linebacker go off the board, Howie Shaughnessy goes to the Ravens. Linebacker was at the top of my needs here, I felt. Chris Barnes, a receiver I liked, went to Detroit. We'll talk about him later. And then we have the Chiefs taking a defensive tackle, Alan Hilliard. I also felt like this was an excellent D-tackle draft, and finding somebody who could maybe replace Jeffrey Simmons was possible. Simon Clemens goes to the Broncos to perhaps be their next quarterback after Russell Wilson. And then at the top of the 2nd round, after the Steelers took a running back, the Texans take a guard, Caleb Edmonds. The Commanders did not take a quarterback in the 1st round. They get him in the 2nd, selecting Kerry Farrell from Baylor. The Raiders were next, and now the top 4 quarterbacks were gone, and they go safety John Murray instead. I did like him. We get to our pick here in the second round. It is in the 20s, so we're outside of the top 50 now. Connor Knox was available, and this was the point where we had our quarterback, we spent the number 1 pick. Do we want Isaiah Simmons, or do we want Connor Knox plus a couple more players? Knox has great athleticism, but nothing quite like Isaiah Simmons. If we stayed put, we could take Knox. We could take a defensive tackle maybe with our next pick. And I just felt like the package you could put together had so much upside here. Isaiah Simmons would be a huge boost, but it would cost us 3 valuable picks. Or Jeffrey Simmons, and now you get to replace him. So ultimately, I threw away the idea of trading for Isaiah Simmons. And I felt like I could still get a really good defensive tackle and possibly find that Simmons replacement for another day. Connor Knox was going to be our pick here. I knew it was a little bit risky, but getting hidden development feels really good. I didn't have his full coverage grades finished, but he was a pass coverage archetype. I knew he was a great athlete. We had to take the chance. That's another need crossed off the board. We had a pick just a couple selections later, which is awesome. You know, not many players are taken before you select again. And I felt like defensive tackle Taylor Jackson was my favorite. I thought he had the upside to be a good run defender, good pass rusher, and his athleticism really stood out. That pass rushing athleticism to me gave him an edge over Marcus Patrick. I then thought about the running back position because, eventually we do have to replace Derrick Henry. And I struggle to find running backs that I think could have the chance to do it. Manny Warner was a very rare day 3 projected player that I thought actually had that upside. Now wasn't the time, but I really liked him. With this pick, I wanted to find a defensive tackle for the future, and we selected Taylor Jackson, our first normal dev player of the draft. 85 strength isn't great, but his speed and athleticism just jumps off the chart. Later in the 3rd round, the Raiders would then take Marcus Patrick, and we'd select again later in the 3rd round. I had interest in safety DeMarcus Elliott, although I didn't actually have like a round grade on him because his coverages were B to D. So he could be a really good safety, or maybe not good in coverage at all. Wide receiver Emmanuel Abbott had good speed at 4.47 at the combine, had A to C short route running, A spec catch. Definitely holes in his game. Could he be a slot receiver? Those were 2 of the risky players I was thinking about. I checked in on AJ Bingham once again, but it was too much for me at this stage, and I decided instead I would take a running back that I see as somebody that could maybe take over for Derrick Henry, and that is Manny Warner. 91 speed, 90 acceleration, hopefully 77 strength is all right, but very big, elusive back with solid speed. We pick again top of the 4th round, and I was also thinking about, okay, if we want to trade, Trevor Penning, we're going to need another tackle. We could use tackle depth regardless, and there were a couple tackles I liked here in the 4th round range. And Malachi Mitchell had B pass block finesse and B pass block power. You can find a lot of these tackles that don't have really good run blocking skills, but can pass protect a little bit. I considered DeMarcus Elliott, but ultimately with this pick, I chose Malachi Mitchell. And I knew this wouldn't be like a super popular pick. He only has 80 strength, but I wanted to believe in the pass blocking skills and A awareness. I then felt like to get the other players I wanted, I might have to make a move. And now that we have Devian Bynes and Trayvon Randolph, I think it's time to trade Treylon Burks, especially because he's not like a prototypical slot receiver. Green Bay was on the clock. They could definitely use some receiving help over there. And I offered them a trade for a 4th round pick and a 7, and they accepted. So Treylon Burks will have a year to maybe work out a deal with Green Bay, and we're going to select DeMarcus Elliott with this pick instead. And we do get a safety, but I wasn't sure how good he would be. This was just a risk, but one I thought that we should take. A little bit later, I packaged up a 5 and a 7 to move up with our rivals in Jacksonville, but moved up 20 spots to then take a wide receiver in Emmanuel Abbott. Again, a risky pick. Abbott and Elliott were two risks that I thought offered us pretty good upside. And that brought us to the later stages of this draft. Bart Hardy went to the Lions, a quarterback I was considering taking with one of our final selections. So in the 6th round, I decided to address linebacker with a pure run stopper in Cameron Fowler. I want to have at least one player with that run stopper archetype. That took us into the 7th round to make our final selection. And the chat had gotten behind wide receiver Tim Cannon. I laid out in this stream how there was a draft story involving Tim Cannon, a 5'11", 200 and some pound receiver, where he was supposed to be moving to tight end. There's no such thing as a 5'11" tight end, so I was so confused and he never actually moved positions. But many people were saying that maybe that he was supposed to be a quarterback instead. And some people looked at his last name being Cannon and decided that was the reason he was going to be a quarterback. Either way, I let the chat handle this one, and we selected Tim Cannon, a playmaking receiver out of UTSA, a school with a lot of history on this channel. And that concluded our Year 3 draft. Let's take a look. 83 overall Trayvon Randolph. I was hoping for at least 79. Brian Nava at 76. I was very happy with the overalls when we saw this draft recap page. Let's check out the number 1 pick. Trayvon Randolph, the first receiver to go number 1 since Keyshawn Johnson. 99 jumping, 93 speed, 97 acceleration. He is a freak athlete. Will work on the route running. He's got everything else. He's a unique player and the top-rated player in this whole class, ahead of running back Tramel Hall, who went a little bit later in the first. Tim Bishop, by the way, ended up only being a 75 overall with normal development. And I was underwhelmed a bit checking out his skills, although I think he's still a good player. He was not in the same conversation as Randolph after all. We went the right direction. And how about at quarterback? Brian Nava, hidden development, quarterback out of Washington. He has very solid accuracies on day 1 to go with 97 throw power. I am so excited to play with him and hopefully have a much different offense than you're used to seeing in this series. We finally have pieces in place, I think, that can get us there. And then Connor Knox at linebacker out of Notre Dame. 90 speed, solid hit power, 69 zone coverage when morale isn't a problem here. And I think that he will be the player that we were looking for and a 3-down starter. Next up, Taylor Jackson, 23 years old. I like his upside as a pass rusher, especially early on, and maybe that will allow him to earn higher development. But I do worry a little bit about his run stopping with the strength being only 85. Manny Warner, 91 speed made me very happy. And then to see he also has 82 juke, 82 break tackle, a little bit of everything. I mean, as far as day 3 running backs go, he's as good as they come for this role we're looking for. Malachi Mitchell. This was probably not a good call. He doesn't have very good ratings across the board, but does have a couple good pass block ratings that will allow him to make an impact earlier. And then DeMarcus Elliott at safety. I was worried about the coverages, but 71 zone is a win with 91 speed. Very similar to Caden Stearns. And he only cost us a mid-round pick. And then Emmanuel Abbott, the wide receiver. Turns out short route running was all right at 75, and I think he does have the skill set to be our slot, but it's going to take some time with 72 catching. That is a concern. But that 99 spec catch, I want to see that. Next, you got Cameron Fowler. 85 speed, 85 hit power with the coaching boost, 77 tackle. Yeah, what's not to like there? And then Tim Cannon, a 55 overall, who doesn't have the skills to be a good receiver. He has some running ability, though. Could it be there was another position for him after all? And could it be Tim Cannon indeed has a bit of a cannon 92 throw power, 80 short accuracy, 75 medium. The chat was right. They led me to Tim Cannon, and he is your new backup quarterback. I could not believe it when I saw those ratings. Preseason is about to be insane. How about the other quarterbacks? Well, Joshua Holcomb had hidden development going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Kenny Pickett era is closing. Sammy Barden, cornerback, goes to Houston. They like Davis Mills. He's like the 16th ranked quarterback in our league. So they go defense again. We'll see if this pick makes a difference. That low press, very concerning. The Jaguars went defense with Marquise Cohn. A little underwhelming. Was the best pass rusher apparently last year. That was the storyline on him. And then Terrell Parker, safety I liked a lot, went to San Francisco. He's very good. Tramel Hale, number 2 player in the draft. Best running back goes to the LA Chargers. Offense in the AFC, even stronger. Receiver Chris Barnes goes to the Lions. I started to like him a lot late. Not enough to take him instead of Trayvon Randolph in like a later stage, but he ended up being very good. And then Simon Clemens, hidden development, great speed. He can develop behind Russell Wilson. I actually love that fit, seeing him, develop behind Wilson when his skill set looks a lot like Wilson's as a young player. The Steelers also took a running back early. So what does this draft mean for Najee Harris and Kenny Pickett? Safety Marco Kilroy went to the Jets, a 77 overall in round 2, but he slid because of injury concerns. He's one of the most injury-prone players in the draft. J.J. Brown, very intriguing running back who went to the Eagles. And the Commanders took their quarterback, Kerry Farrell. The top 4 all show a lot of promise, all have hidden development. I don't think I've ever seen that. There wasn't a wrong choice. A good corner goes to the Jags. James Beverly, man cover, great speed. Love that. Marcus Patrick. Turned out he had hidden development, was younger than Taylor Jackson, stronger. He would have been the right pick for us. But I still think this can work out. Another player on my board I liked a little bit less was Angelo Blades. And he's not developed yet, but he has hidden development and elite strength. A slot receiver who went in the 4th round, Landon Long. Really good route runnings, good speed, acceleration. Wouldn't have been a bad pick for us. I was very happy with this draft. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Going through some signings I made afterwards. A mentor quarterback in Marcus Mariota. Christopher Carradine didn't get taken, so we're going to be picking him up as an undrafted free agent. Along with the tackle, Manu Gonzalez, similar overall to Malachi Mitchell. And then, Deshaun Holiday. He's 6'9", 376 pounds, a powerful offensive lineman. We sign him. And then a linebacker, really high speed, really interested in his run-stopping ability, Raekwon Cumberland. We add defensive back depth, bringing in Wake Forest rookie Dion McLeod as some competition. And a punter, Rich Matthews, looked really good, although we had signed Jack Fox in free agency. And then defensive tackle Clarence McGee. That's when the stream ended. Afterwards, I made a few more changes to the roster, first making some cuts for players that I didn't think would get much playing time. We do trade Hassan Haskins for a 7th round pick because I want to play Manny Warner instead. But Cedric Pierce was released, along with some other players that have been here for a little bit, like Lindsey Gross. And then I spent some time doing some customization and swapping numbers around. So Divine Diablo is going to be wearing number 33. We release Max Wheeler. And then, what do you do with Malik Willis? Well, I wanted to give him an opportunity to maybe catch on somewhere else. And there was a team that did not take a quarterback that could still use one. And I'm going to be trading him to the Las Vegas Raiders. All I'm asking for in return is a 4th round pick. It's hard to gauge value on a quarterback that didn't pan out but still has some value. I mean, Josh Rosen went for a 2 after he was a number 1 pick. So he's going to go to Las Vegas. Maybe he'll be their starter. And if that's the case, we'll see him in week 6 in Las Vegas. I signed a veteran guard, Forrest Lamp, and then a young guard, Rob Vance. I've edited some appearances already. I'm never sure what everybody's looking for when it comes to equipment, but I thought I came up with some okay designs here. Connor Knox, he's got number 58. He's been customized. Tim Cannon, we're going to give him the number 10, and he's been decked out a little bit, and he'll be unleashed in the preseason. Leave a like for Tim Cannon. You picked him, after all. And then Brian Nava. We're going to give him the number 12. Manny Warner at running back. We're giving him number 25. And there's a little more red in his equipment. And Trayvon Randolph. We're going back to the 80s here. Come on now. Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss. We're going to bring back the 80s. Then I signed a cornerback in Kendall Joyner to give us a little more competition. Here's the transaction log showing you everything that I did here in this late stage. A bunch of minor stuff pretty much, but wanted to get the roster set up for the preseason. At least for now, these are the 4 focused players, all rookies, all expected to have a role. And here is your starting lineup going into preseason. Devian Bynes, Trayvon Randolph, Sal Sexton. Cannot wait to see how this plays out for Brian Nava in his rookie season. And then defensively, have we done enough? Are the linebacker upgrades going to solve some of those issues? Will the 4-3 scheme maybe help us against the run? Will Aleem McNeil be a boost? Ronnie Harrison? A lot of questions still on that defense, but I think everybody is going to be expecting fireworks when it comes to this offense. I've rebuilt pretty much everything there outside of Derrick Henry. He and Nate Davis are the only starters on offense that remain from the year 1 team. And I can't wait for preseason to come your way. Later this week, I'll be doing some streaming and putting together the preseason video as we work our way towards week 1 of season 4. Leave your thoughts on the offseason down below. Hit that like button, subscribe. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.